Getting truly great video quality out of older systems on modern displays can be a challenging and expensive endeavor depending on what the player's needs might be. Whether it's streaming or just looking halfway decent on a 50-inch LED TV, the quest for great picture can be challenging, expensive, or both. We've been at this for a while now and our needs have shifted considerably. Throughout the 10 years we've been taking our online videos relatively seriously, we've used a number of devices to squeeze out a moderately decent picture, at the time anyway, out of our consoles. But now things are getting really serious. We've been using the MyComsoft XRGB Mini framemeister for a while now, and generally speaking, we're very satisfied with the results we've gotten. Generally speaking. There are a couple of things about the framemeister that kind of make it unsuitable for certain situations. It's also a very expensive unit any way you slice it, so casual users may not find the same value in its cost as video producers like us do. And that's fine. However, we have another great device that does some fantastic stuff in terms of blasting out a high quality image from our retro systems. The OSSC, or Open Source Scan Converter, is, when combined with VGA, RGB SCART, or YPBPR video sources, our secret weapon for capturing tricky video signals. And it does a fantastic job for streaming and other capture applications. This vastly more cost-effective device should very easily fit the needs of most players looking to get a nice, sharp picture from 240p, 480i, and even 480p video on sets that increasingly no longer support component, RGB SCART, and VGA inputs. The device is small, only about half the size by volume as the framemeister. It has kind of a Big Mac style design with 3 panels that make up its main structure. Though a small backlit screen is built in to show options and status readings as well as a pair of buttons to navigate it, an optional remote is highly recommended to efficiently access the finer bits to the OSSC's operations. The OSSC runs off of a 5-volt power supply that can also be purchased with the OSSC through Video Game Perfection. It plugs in next to the VGA port on the unit. A pair of 3.5mm jacks can be found flanking the HDMI port, one for component in, known as A2, and the other for VGA in, designated A3. A1 is SCART, which carries its own audio signals, and the A2 3.5mm port can also be used to line out to analog devices from A1. Which brings us to the main inputs. All 3 available inputs are easily accessible, but can sometimes be a little messy when using the unit for component or VGA sources, especially since the audio in for both are located on different sides than the video inputs. An aux cable is typically needed for use with VGA, and component will usually require a female RCA audio to 3.5mm adapter for the red and white audio bits on a component cable, like this Wii component cable from Nintendo here. SCART is therefore the most hassle-free way to connect a retro device to an HDTV using the OSSC. Early models had only DVI out and required a DVI to HDMI converter, but new units like ours have the HDMI port built right in. The idea behind the OSSC is very different than the processes behind the framemeister. The OSSC is often compared to it as an upscaler, which is incorrect. Instead, it is a line doubler, taking an interlaced or progressive signal and doubling the lines it receives vertically and horizontally up to 5 times depending on the signal. That means if the signal is progressive, like 240p, coming from a system like the Super Famicom or PC Engine, it will remain progressive while other sources like PlayStation 2 will remain interlaced, but bigger. The OSSC also has the ability to deinterlace signals through Bob deinterlacing, though generally speaking the framemeister still does a better job at making these signals look a bit cleaner through its unique brand of sorcery, though this comes at a cost of a few admittedly negligible frames of image lag. However, everything the OSSC does, it does blisteringly fast with exactly 0 lag. The only image delay players will encounter is the inherent lag in the television or monitor they may be using. This is particularly helpful for players who need a high degree of precision between their button presses and what appears on screen, which just so happens to be perfect for shmups and streaming. The term line doubler can often be a misnomer, obviously, as the output through the OSSC is also boosted up to a 5-line scan to a maximum resolution of 1600 by 1200, depending on the source and how many scans are enabled. Some maximum resolutions like 960p require players to have a TV or monitor that supports them. Most computer monitors do, but TVs can be much more finicky. That said, in lieu of a higher line count, the OSSC also allows for many game systems to be passed through via HDMI in their native resolutions. This reduces many of the nasty artifacts typically associated with jacking a composite source into an HD panel, as the interlace is either properly reproduced or smoothed out through subtle deinterlace methods. There are some challenges though, especially when it comes down to capture and streaming. Chiefly among these, not all capture devices jive with the OSSC. Elgato capture devices, for example, just outright reject it. We use the StarTech USB 3 HD cap, and while it affords a decent degree of compatibility, it locks up at certain scan levels that vary by the console we happen to be using. For example, grabbing a 5-line scan works for PS1, but the Super Famicom only works in a stable manner at 3. In fact, the 3-line scan is probably the sweet spot for the OSSC, as a lot of 5-line scans cause clipping at the top and bottom of the screen. In most cases, this still results in an excellent 720p image, which is awesome for streaming. With this in mind, a list of compatible capture devices is available on Video Game Perfection's website. In our case, the framemeister wins the day for most capture scenarios. The 1080p upscaling afforded by the framemeister is still better for our specific needs. But the OSSC is still critical for us due to a pair of specific needs. It's our secret weapon for capturing Dreamcast and PAL format games. The framemeister does real weird things with a PAL signal, but with the OSSC, the aspect ratio is much better maintained. Capturing Dreamcast games at 960p through the incredible Retro Gaming Cable's 480p Dreamcast God cable has produced some of the sharpest imagery we've ever seen out of this unmodded little white box. Whether it's through VGA or this all-in-one super cable, the OSSC outclasses the framemeister without question. With the exception, of course, of games like Bang.io and Gunbird 2, which run in 240p. That can be cleanly scaled up to 1080p without a hitch. Speaking of RGB cables though, one very important detail regarding the OSSC is that it only accepts Euroscart cables, not JP21. While they both look identical to each other, they are wired differently and may cause damage to your equipment if used in devices that are incompatible with them. For the best in Euroscart cabling, we recommend RGB cables from retrogamingcables.co.uk. Our OSSC was provided to us by Video Game Perfection, which sells what is definitely the best quality version available today. Let's get the main detail out of the way here first. For only about $170 after taxes, it is well under half the cost of the framemeister from Solaris Japan. Even adding a remote with an overlay and a power supply still comes to less than half the price of the framemeister. So when it all comes down to brass tacks, a balance does exist for creators such as ourselves that need the power the framemeister offers with the added flexibility that the OSSC affords. But what about regular gamers? Well, it's just as useful for them too. The OSSC is therefore a device that should be present in any retro enthusiast's arsenal, whether it's for recording or streaming, or just general gameplay on a modern set. And all at a cost that's less than you think.